When the judge's gavel came down, a deafening silence filled the courtroom. 50 years of waiting, 50 years of pain, and finally, justice had a face. Mine. I was 82 years old, and for the first time in my life, the law was on my side. The court finds that the property of the late Victor Jackson rightfully belongs to Mrs. Martha Wilson Jackson, he declared firmly. My grandchildren embraced me as tears streamed down my wrinkled face. I wasn't crying for the victory. I was crying for all the time lost. My son Joseph sat on the other side of the courtroom, eyes fixed on the floor. He couldn't bear to look me in the eye. Beside him was that woman, Claudia, who had helped destroy our family. They were defeated, but I felt no joy in this, only a deep, wrenching relief. "Grandma, let's go home," whispered Sophia, my favorite granddaughter. "You won." No, I hadn't won. I had only recovered what had always belonged to me. The house in the historic district of Harlem, the soul food restaurant, the savings of a lifetime. Everything Victor and I had built together, with our hands, with our sweat, everything that had been snatched from me through deception. As I left the courtroom, leaning on my grandson Marcus's arm, I thought back to how it all began. Not with this legal battle, but much earlier, with a marriage that seemed like a dream and slowly transformed into a nightmare. It was the summer of 1960 when I met Victor. I was 17. He was 24. I worked in my daddy's grocery store in Harlem, selling fruits and vegetables. Victor would come in every day to buy a peach, just one. He'd smile, pay, and leave. After a month, he confessed that he didn't even like peaches. He just came to see me. We married the following year, against my mama's wishes. "He's too ambitious," she said. "Ambitious men don't have time for loving." I didn't listen. I was young, in love, stubborn. I believed love could conquer everything. How naive. The early years were happy. I can't deny that. We worked hard, saved every penny. Victor had a dream, to open his own restaurant. I supported him, believed in him. We cooked together, experimented with recipes. My sweet potato pie was the secret everyone envied. "It's in your hands," Victor would say. "You've got magic in your fingers." In 1964, Joseph was born, our son. Happiness seemed complete. The restaurant had opened the year before and was doing well. I worked in the kitchen while Victor managed the dining room. We'd come home exhausted, but satisfied. We'd put Joseph to bed, and then sometimes stay up until dawn, counting the money earned, making plans, dreaming of the future. I didn't know those moments of happiness would be so brief, so fragile. I didn't know that fortune can turn its back on you in an instant, that people can change, that love can transform into something unrecognizable. The restaurant, Victor's Place, soon became one of the most renowned in Harlem. Tourists lined up to eat with us. Food critics praised us. Money started coming in, lots of money, and with it, the first problems. Victor changed. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. He came home later, drank more bourbon, talked less. When I asked what was wrong, he got angry. "Nothing," he'd say. "I'm just tired." But I knew there was something more. One December night in 1970, while tidying his office at the back of the restaurant, I found a letter. It was perfumed, written in elegant handwriting. I opened it with trembling hands, though I already knew what I would find. "My dearest Victor," it began. I had only read those 3 words when I heard his voice behind me. "What are you doing?" His voice was cold, in a way I'd never heard before. I turned slowly, the letter still in my hand. Who is Isabella? I asked. He didn't answer. He snatched the letter from my hands, tore it into 1,000 pieces. Then he looked at me with eyes I no longer recognized. "Don't stick your nose in my business," he said. "You focus on the kitchen. I'll handle everything else." That night I cried silently in our bed while he slept beside me, as if nothing had happened. Joseph was 6 years old then, sleeping in the room next door. I remember thinking about him, about his future, about the family that was crumbling around us. The next day, Victor came home with a gift, a gold bracelet, expensive, flashy. "To make it up to you," he said. I accepted it, put it on. I smiled. I pretended everything was fine. It was the beginning of my long, very long performance. For years. I closed my eyes, focused on work, on Joseph. I ignored the signs, the absences, the strange perfumes on his clothes. I told myself it was just a phase, that it would pass, that I had to be patient. But in 1975, everything came to a head. Isabella wasn't the only one. There were other women, and there was something darker, more dangerous. Victor had started frequenting people I didn't like, men with hard looks, who spoke in low voices, who left packages in his office. One night I heard him on the phone. He was talking about money, debts, fixing things. When he saw me at the door, he hung up abruptly. "Go to bed," he ordered. It wasn't a request. It was a command. That night I made a decision. For the first time in my life, I decided to act instead of suffer. I waited until he was asleep, then went to his study. I opened drawers, closets, searched everywhere, and I found it. A black book, full of names, figures, dates. I didn't understand everything, but I understood enough. I hid it under the mattress. It was my insurance, my protection. I didn't yet know how I would use it, but I knew that someday it would serve me. The next day, Victor was furious. He turned the office upside down looking for that book. He didn't find it. He didn't dare accuse me openly, but his eyes told me he suspected me. From that moment, he began to shut me out of his life completely. I was no longer his partner, just the cook in his restaurant, the mother of his son. But I had the book, and I had a plan. In the months that followed, I watched Victor like a hawk. I noted his every movement, every suspicious call, every unusual visitor to the restaurant. Joseph was 11 and beginning to notice something wasn't right between his father and me. "Why doesn't Daddy ever eat with us?" he would ask. "He's busy, honey," I'd reply. "The restaurant takes a lot of time." But the truth was that Victor was pulling away more and more. Not just from me, but from our son too. It was as if he had created a new parallel life, a life in which we didn't exist. One Sunday in May 1976, after church, Victor surprised me. "Get ready. We're going out," he said. It was the first time in months he had invited me anywhere. I put on my best dress, fixed my hair carefully. Maybe, I naively thought, maybe he's trying to start over. He took me to an area of Harlem I didn't know well. Elegant, expensive. We stopped in front of a new building with a shiny wooden door and brass handles. "I want to show you something," he said, leading me inside. It was an apartment, large, bright, furnished with expensive furniture, silk curtains, Persian rugs. "Do you like it?" he asked. "It's beautiful," I replied, confused. "Whose is it?" "It's mine. I bought it last month." My heart sank. "Ours, you mean?" He looked at me with those cold eyes I had learned to fear. "No, Martha. Mine. I intend to move here." "Move? And me? And Joseph?" You two stay in the old house. It's big enough for both of you." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He was talking as if he were discussing the weather, not the destruction of our family. "Are you leaving me?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Things don't work between us anymore, you know that. You don't make me happy. And Joseph, have you thought about your son?" He made a vague gesture with his hand. "I'll see him regularly. He can come here on weekends." I felt like my heart had been ripped from my chest. Not for me. I had accepted long ago that my marriage was over. But for my son. How could I tell him his father was leaving? How could I explain that our family no longer existed? "There's someone else, isn't there?" I asked. He didn't even have the courage to deny it. "Her name is Claudia. She's young, Martha. She makes me feel alive." Young. The word hit me like a slap. I was 33. I wasn't old. But in Victor's eyes, I was already a burden, a reminder of the past. "I want a divorce," he added. Divorce was still a stigma in our community, a shame that stained the whole family. Divorced women were looked at with suspicion, with pity. Children of divorced parents were singled out at school, at church, everywhere. "No," I said. My voice was firm, decisive. "What do you mean, no?" "I won't give you a divorce. You won't destroy Joseph's life." He came closer to me, threatening. "You don't have a choice, Martha." "I have the book," I said simply. He paled. "What book?" "You know perfectly well which one. The black book, with all the names, dates, figures. I know what you do behind the scenes at the restaurant, Victor. I know who you meet with, who you pay, who pays you." He grabbed me by the arms, squeezing so hard he left bruises. "Where have you hidden it?" "In a safe place, and if anything happens to me, it will go straight to the police." He let me go, as if he'd been burned. In his eyes, I saw something new for the first time. Fear. He was afraid of me, the docile wife, the silent cook he had taken for granted for years. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice suddenly cautious. "I want you to stay in our house. I want you to be a father to Joseph. I want our marriage to remain intact, at least in the eyes of the world." "And you're Claudia?" I added with contempt. He looked away. "I can see her discreetly. Like you've seen all the others. But you won't live with her. You won't give her my place, the place of the mother of your son." We went home in silence. From that day on, we lived a strange, painful charade. Victor slept in the guest room. He went out often, came back late. But in the eyes of the world, we were still a family. We attended Joseph's school functions together. We sat together at the table on Sundays after church. We smiled in photographs. Joseph wasn't stupid. He felt the tension, saw the silences. But he was a sensitive child. He avoided asking questions he knew would cause pain. He took refuge in books, in studying. He became the top of his class, as if his successes could somehow fill the void he felt at home. In 1979, Victor changed again. He became more present, more attentive. He came home for dinner, brought gifts for Joseph, sometimes even for me. At first, I was suspicious. Then I understood. He needed me. The restaurant was doing poorly. Competition had increased. Costs had risen. His friends demanded more and more money. One night I found him in his study, head in his hands. "What's wrong?" I asked. "We're in trouble," he admitted. "If we don't find new customers, new income, we'll have to close." It was the first time in years he had talked to me about business. The first time he had treated me like a partner again. I sat down across from him. "I can help." He looked up, surprised. "How?" "My recipes. People come for my cooking, Victor. Everyone knows it. We can create new dishes, organize special nights. We can save the restaurant, together." He hesitated, then nodded. "All right." We worked side by side for months. I created new menus, trained young cooks, brought back the magic of the early years. Slowly, the restaurant began to fill again. Customers returned. Critics wrote enthusiastic reviews. "It's thanks to you," Victor told me one night. We were alone, in the kitchen after closing. "You've saved everything." I felt something melt inside me. Not love, that had died years ago, but a certain pride, a satisfaction. "We did it together," I replied. He looked at me for a long time, as if he really saw me for the first time in a long time. "I'm sorry, Martha, for everything. You've been the best woman I could have had, and I've been the worst man for you." I didn't answer. The apologies came too late, too weak. But I accepted them in silence because it was all I could get. In 1980, Joseph was 16. He was a handsome, intelligent, serious boy. He dreamed of becoming a lawyer. He studied hard, read law books he borrowed from the public library. I encouraged him with all my heart. I saw in him the possibility of a different life, a better life. Victor, on the other hand, wanted Joseph to take over the restaurant. "It's our legacy," he said. It was built for him. But Joseph wasn't interested. "I want to defend people, Dad," he said. "I want to fight for justice." Victor would get angry, shout. I would intervene, defend my son. This created new tensions, new conflicts. One day, coming home earlier than expected, I found Victor rummaging through my things. He was still looking for the black book. "You'll never find it," I told him from the doorway. He spun around, caught red-handed. "I need that book, Martha. It's dangerous. If it falls into the wrong hands..." "It's safe," I interrupted, "as long as you respect our agreements." He looked at me with a mixture of anger and respect. "You've become tough." I had a good teacher. From that day on, I noticed that Victor observed me differently. With caution, certainly, but also with a new awareness. I was no longer the naive girl he had married. I was a woman who knew how to stand up for herself, who had her secrets, her powers. In 1983, Claudia officially entered my life, not by my choice, but through a series of events I could never have foreseen. It was a cool November evening. The wind was blowing hard, the kind that seems to want to sweep away all sorrows. I was closing the kitchen when I heard a commotion. In the restaurant dining room. Shouting, crying, the sound of breaking glass. I ran out and saw her. A young woman. She must have been about 25. Beautiful, with long braids and dark eyes full of anger. She was throwing plates, glasses, anything she could get her hands on at Victor, who was trying to calm her down. "You're a liar," she shouted. "You promised me. You swore to me." The customers were paralyzed, some amused, others scandalized. The waiters didn't know what to do. I stood in the kitchen doorway, unable to move. Then the woman saw me. She stopped suddenly, a plate still in her hand. "You must be Martha," she said, suddenly calm. I nodded, unable to speak. "I'm Claudia," she said, as if presenting a business card. "Your husband's lover, for 8 years. The silence that fell over the restaurant was so thick you could cut it with a knife. All eyes were on me. They were waiting for my reaction, my breakdown, perhaps even a fight between hurt women, but I didn't give them that satisfaction. I slowly approached Claudia, gently took the plate from her hands and placed it on the nearest table. Then, in a calm voice that surprised even me, I said, "Why don't you come to the office? We can talk in private." She hesitated, confused by my reaction. Then she followed me to Victor's office, with him trailing behind us, his face as pale as a sheet. "Out," I told my husband when he tried to enter with us. "This is a conversation between women." For once he obeyed without protest. I closed the door and sat at the desk, gesturing for Claudia to take the seat across from me. "So, what's made you so angry?" She looked at me suspiciously. "Aren't you angry? Aren't you shocked?" I smiled sadly. "My dear, I've known about Claudia's existence for 8 years. I didn't know it was you specifically, but I knew there was a Claudia." Her eyes widened. "And you didn't do anything?" "I did what I had to do to protect my son and myself. And now, I repeat my question. What's made you angry enough to come destroy my restaurant?" "Your restaurant?" she asked, confused. "Yes, mine. I'm the one who cooks. I'm the one who creates the dishes people come to eat. Victor is just the facade." She was silent for a moment, then said, "I'm pregnant." Those 2 words hit me like a punch to the stomach. Not from jealousy, that emotion had died long ago, but from the immediate awareness of what they meant: a baby, an heir, a huge complication. "And Victor isn't happy about the news?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "He told me to get rid of it," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "He said he can't afford a scandal, that his wife would use this information against him, that he would lose everything." I felt a pang of compassion for this young woman. She had been deceived, just like me. Victor had made her the same promises, sold her the same dreams. "How old are you, Claudia?" 27. "And what do you do?" "I'm a kindergarten teacher." I nodded slowly. A kindergarten teacher. A woman who loved children. A woman who now carried my son's half-sibling in her womb. "Listen to me carefully," I told her. "Whatever you decide to do with this pregnancy is your choice, not Victor's. But you need to know who the man you've gotten involved with really is." And so, on that strange November night, I told Claudia the true story of Victor Jackson, the shady business dealings, the lies, the other women before her. I told her about my life, about my fractured marriage held together only by appearances. Not to get revenge on Victor, but to give this young woman what I had never had: the truth. When I finished, Claudia was pale but calm. "Why are you telling me all this?" she asked. "Because you have a choice that I never had. You can leave. You can build a life away from him." She shook her head. "I can't. I love this baby. And despite everything, I still love him." I sighed. Love. That irrational force that pushes us to forgive the unforgivable, to believe the unbelievable. "Then we need to find an agreement." "An agreement?" "Yes. You, me, and Victor. Because this baby changes everything." I called Victor into the office. He entered cautiously, looking first at me, then at Claudia, trying to understand what had happened. In his absence, "Sit down," I ordered, and once again he obeyed. "Claudia is pregnant," I said without preamble. "And she's keeping the baby." His face went from pale to red in an instant. "Martha, Be quiet," I interrupted him. "I'm not interested in hearing your excuses or explanations. I'm only interested in finding a solution that protects everyone involved, including this innocent baby." And so, on that surreal night, we negotiated the future of our intertwined lives. Victor would buy an apartment for Claudia, not far from our house. He would acknowledge the baby, give it his last name. He would contribute financially. But our marriage would remain intact, at least officially, and the restaurant would remain under our joint control. "And Joseph?" Victor asked. "What will we tell him?" "The truth," I answered. "He's a man now, not a child. He deserves to know he'll have a half-brother or half-sister." When Claudia left, the office much calmer than when she had entered, Victor remained seated staring into space. "Why are you doing this, Martha?" he finally asked. "Why don't you take advantage of this situation to get rid of me, to divorce me, to take everything?" I looked at him for a long time before answering. "Because it's no longer just about us. There's an innocent baby involved. And because—" I hesitated, searching for the right words. "Because we're not so different, you and I. We've both made selfish choices. We've both lied. You for love of freedom, me for love of security." He stood up, came closer to me. For a moment I thought he wanted to embrace me, but he stopped a step away. "You're an extraordinary woman, Martha. I've underestimated you for too long." "Yes," I replied simply. "You have." In June 1984, Sophia was born, Victor and Claudia's daughter. A beautiful baby girl, with her mother's dark eyes and her father's smile. Joseph, who had come back from Howard University to meet his half-sister, was shocked by the situation, but handled everything with a maturity that filled me with pride. "I'm not angry with you, Mom," he told me. "I'm angry with him. How could he do this to you? How could he do this to us?" "Life is complicated, my son," I answered. "Sometimes we make choices that seem right at the moment, but have consequences we hadn't foreseen. But you're staying with him. Why?" I couldn't tell him the whole truth about the black book, the blackmail, his father's shady business dealings, so I told a half-truth. For the restaurant, for financial security, for tradition. He wasn't satisfied with the answer, but he accepted it. He returned to college, promising to visit more often and to keep an eye on his father. The first years, after Sophia's birth, were strange. Victor divided himself between two houses, two families. I managed the restaurant, created new menus, trained young chefs. Claudia raised her daughter and continued teaching kindergarten. We were like planets in separate orbits, but bound by the gravity of a man who, paradoxically, was becoming less and less important in our lives. In 1988, Joseph graduated from law school. I cried with joy at his graduation ceremony. My son, a lawyer, the first in the family to earn a college degree. Victor was proud too, in his way, though he still regretted that Joseph hadn't chosen to take over the restaurant. "I might come back someday," Joseph had told his father. "But first, I want to gain experience in the legal world." He had joined a law firm in Manhattan, specializing in civil rights law. He was brilliant, determined, ambitious. In a few years, he had become one of the most promising lawyers at the firm. In 1990, 6 years after Sophia's birth, our strange family situation had found its equilibrium. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. Victor spent 3 days a week with me in the restaurant, 4 with Claudia and Sophia. I had my kitchen, my customers, my regained independence. Claudia had a home, a daughter, a part-time companion, And Sophia had both parents, albeit in an unconventional configuration. But just when I thought we had found stability, fate had another surprise in store for us. It was a warm July day in 1991 when everything changed again. The restaurant was closed for summer vacation. Victor had gone with Claudia and Sophia to a beach house they had rented near the Hamptons. I had stayed in Harlem, enjoying the peace of the empty house, experimenting with new recipes for the fall menu. The phone rang shortly after noon. It was a number I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Jackson?" asked a male voice I didn't know. "Yes, that's me." "This is Dr. Thompson from Southampton Hospital. I'm calling about your husband, Victor Jackson." My heart rose to my throat. What happened? "There's been an accident, ma'am. A car collided head-on with your husband's on the coastal road." I sat down slowly, my legs suddenly weak. "Is it serious?" There was a moment of hesitation on the other end of the line. "I'm afraid so, ma'am. Your husband has suffered multiple traumas. He's in intensive care." "And was there anyone else in the car with him?" Another silence. "No, ma'am. He was alone." I closed my eyes, feeling a mixture of relief and concern. Claudia and Sophia were okay. But why was Victor alone in the car? Where was he going? "I'll come right away," I said. The journey to Southampton was the longest of my life. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. Despite everything that had happened between us, despite the pain and betrayals, Victor was still my husband, the father of my son, the man with whom I had built a life. At the hospital, I found Claudia sitting in the waiting room, with Sophia asleep on her lap. Her face was swollen from crying. "Martha," she said, standing up, "you came." "Of course, I came. How is he?" She shook her head. "Not well. The doctors say he has internal bleeding, multiple fractures. They're operating on him now." I sat beside her, looking at the sleeping child. Sophia was 7 years old, with the same dark eyes as Victor, the same stubborn chin. She was innocent, unaware of the complicated web of lies and compromises that surrounded her existence. "What exactly happened?" I asked quietly. Claudia hesitated. "I'm not sure exactly. This morning he said he had to meet someone for business, that he'd be back for lunch." Business. The word set off an alarm in my mind. After all these years, was Victor still doing business with the wrong people? Did he say who he was meeting? No. He was strange these last few days, worried. He was getting calls that upset him. I nodded slowly. I knew those signs. I had seen them many times over the years. We waited for hours. Sophia woke up, recognized me. She had met me several times and hugged me with a naturalness that broke my heart. "Grandma Martha," she called me, even though technically I wasn't her grandmother. It was the name Claudia had taught her to use with me, a small gesture of respect that I had always appreciated. Finally, a doctor came to talk to us. His face was grave. "The operation went well, but Mr. Jackson's condition remains critical. The next 48 hours will be decisive." "Can we see him?" Claudia asked. "Only for a few minutes. He's sedated and needs absolute rest." We decided that Claudia would go first with Sophia. I waited in the hallway, feeling strangely out of place. It was a feeling I knew well. Being the legal wife but not the real companion. Having a title but not a role. When it was my turn, I entered the room with a heavy heart. Victor lay motionless, connected to machines that emitted rhythmic and disturbing sounds. His face was swollen, unrecognizable, his arms full of tubes and needles. He seemed smaller, more fragile than I remembered. I sat beside him and, after a moment of hesitation, took his hand in mine. It was cold, inert. "Victor," I whispered. "It's Martha." No reaction, just the constant sound of the machines. "I don't know if you can hear me. The doctors say you should recover, but it will take time." I looked at his disfigured face, searching for the man I had loved, the man I had hated, the man who, despite everything, had been part of my life for over 30 years. "You can't die now," I said firmly. "Not after all we've been through. Not before we've settled things." I squeezed his hand a little tighter. "You have 2 children who need you. And you have me." I didn't even know what I meant by those last words. I no longer loved him. Not the way a wife loves a husband. But we were bound by something deeper than romantic love. A shared history, memories, secrets, a son. I sat in silence for the rest of the visit, holding his hand, listening to the rhythm of the machines keeping him alive. When the nurse came to tell me time was up, I slowly stood, brushed Victor's forehead with a light kiss, and left. In the hallway, Claudia was waiting for me. Sophia had been picked up by a neighbor who had come to get her. "We need to talk," Claudia told me. "There's something you should know." We went to the hospital cafeteria. It was almost empty at that late hour. We sat in a corner, 2 women bound by the same man, now suspended in a limbo of waiting and worry. "Victor has problems," Claudia began. "Serious problems." "What kind of problems?" "Debts, many debts, with dangerous people." I wasn't surprised. Victor's business always had a dark side. "Since when?" "For a few months, maybe more. He didn't tell me until 2 weeks ago, when they started threatening him." "Threatening him?" She nodded, her eyes full of fear. "They said if he didn't pay by the end of the month, they would come after his family, after Sophia." A chill ran down my spine. It was one thing to threaten an adult man, another to threaten an innocent child. "And the accident?" I asked, a terrible suspicion forming in my mind. Claudia lowered her voice. "The police say it was an accident. The other car invaded the lane, but She hesitated. "I'm not sure." I closed my eyes for a moment, absorbing the implication. Someone might have tried to kill Victor, and that someone might still be a threat to all of us. "How much money does he owe?" I asked. $300,000. An enormous sum, almost the entire value of the restaurant and house combined. "To whom?" She shook her head. "I don't know exactly. He talked about a man called the Boss, but I think it's just a nickname." The Boss? The name sounded vaguely familiar. Maybe I had heard Victor mention it years ago, or maybe I had read it in the Black Book. The Black Book. Suddenly I remembered. After all these years, that book could still be our salvation, or our ruin. "Claudia," I said, taking her hands in mine, "listen to me carefully. You need to take Sophia and go away for a while. Do you have relatives far from here?" "My sister lives in Atlanta." "Good. Go to her. Today. Don't tell anyone where you're going, not even me. Come back only when I call. You and tell you it's safe." She looked at me with wide eyes. "And Victor?" "I'll take care of him. I'm still his wife, legally. I can make medical decisions. I can manage his affairs. But the money, the debt..." I squeezed her hands a little tighter. "Let me handle that. You just think about protecting Sophia." She stood up, confused but determined. "All right. I trust you, Martha." "One more thing," I added. "If anything should happen to me, contact my son Joseph. He's a lawyer in Manhattan. He'll know what to do." She looked at me with a mixture of fear and respect. "You're a strong woman, Martha. Stronger than Victor ever understood." "No," I replied with a sad smile. "I'm just a woman who has learned to survive." So, after Claudia left, I returned to Victor's room. He was still unconscious, but the doctors said his vital signs were stable. I made a decision. I would stay with him until he woke up. Not out of love, but out of necessity. I needed answers, information, and he was the only one who could give them to me. I called Joseph in Manhattan, told him about the accident, but not about the debts or threats. I didn't want to involve him in this mess, not yet. He promised he would come as soon as possible. For 3 days I kept vigil at Victor's bedside. I slept in a chair, ate from the hospital cafeteria, washed in the small bathroom of the room. The nurses, taking pity, brought me blankets and coffee. The doctors gave me cautious but encouraging updates. His condition was slowly improving. On the morning of the 4th day, while I was reading a book beside his bed, I felt a movement. I looked up and saw Victor's eyes open, looking at me with surprising lucidity. "Martha," he whispered, his voice hoarse and weak. "I'm here," I answered, moving closer. "Water." I held a cup with a straw to him, helped him take a few sips. Then he asked, "Where am I? What happened?" "You're in Southampton Hospital. You had a car accident. You've been operated on." He closed his eyes for a moment as if trying to remember. Then he opened them again, suddenly alarmed. "Claudia! Sophia!" "They're fine. They're safe." He visibly relaxed. "Thank God." I waited for him to recover a bit, then asked, "Victor, who is the boss?" His body tensed, his eyes widened. "How do you know?" "Claudia told me about the debts, the threats." He looked away. "You shouldn't know about this. It's not your problem. It became my problem the moment they threatened your family, our family." He took a deep, painful breath. "The boss is a loan shark, a criminal. I asked him for money when the restaurant had problems last year." "Problems? What problems? The restaurant was doing well?" He hesitated. "There were other expenses." "What kind of expenses?" Silence. "Victor," I insisted, "if you want me to help you, you have to tell me the truth, the whole truth." He sighed, defeated. "Gambling. I have a problem. For years. Usually I can keep it under control, but last year, it got out of hand. Gambling. After all these years, after all the sacrifices I had made to keep our family intact, to protect the restaurant, Victor had risked it all for an addiction he had kept hidden. I felt anger rising inside me, but I contained it. It wasn't the time. "How much have you lost exactly?" "Everything," he whispered. "The savings, the restaurant profits. I even mortgaged the summer house. And then I went to the boss." "And the accident? Was it really an accident?" He hesitated, then shook his head slightly. "I'm not sure. I was going to meet one of the boss's men. Then a car came from the other direction, very fast." He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. The message was clear. It had been a warning. The next one could be fatal. "Listen to me carefully," I said, moving closer to his bed. "I've sent Claudia and Sophia to a safe place. You'll stay here until you've fully recovered. And I'll find a solution." He looked at me with eyes full of shame and desperation. "There is no solution, Martha. We can't get all that money in such a short time." I smiled, a cold smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Maybe you can't, but I can." That same evening I returned to Harlem. I went directly to our house, went up to the attic, and moved an old trunk. Behind it was a small opening in the wall that I had created years before. I reached in and pulled out a sealed plastic bag. Inside was Victor's black book, yellowed, dusty, but still intact. I opened it with trembling hands. Pages and pages of names, dates, figures, meeting places. It was a detailed map of Harlem's criminal underworld from the 70s, with all the connections, debts, favors, and among the names, the one I was looking for, the boss, Benjamin Taylor. With an address in Brooklyn and a series of figures that represented, I suppose, past transactions, I closed the book, put it back in the bag. It had been my insurance all these years. Now it would be my weapon. The next day, I took a taxi to an exclusive area of Brooklyn. I hadn't told anyone where I was going, not even Joseph, who had arrived in Southampton to be with his father. I had only told him that I had urgent matters to attend to and would be back soon. I felt vulnerable as I walked through the quiet, elegant streets with the bag containing the black book in my purse. But I was determined. For the first time in my life, I was taking complete control of the situation. The address I had found in the book led to an imposing mansion with high walls and a wrought iron gate. I hesitated in front of the intercom, then pressed the button. A metallic voice answered. "Who is it?" "Martha Wilson Jackson. I'm Victor Jackson's wife. I need to speak with Mr. Taylor." Silence. Then the gate opened with a click. I entered an immaculate garden with a fountain in the center and gravel paths leading to the main house. A man in a dark suit was waiting for me at the door. "Mr. Taylor doesn't receive without an appointment," he said. "Mr. Taylor will want to see me." I responded with more confidence than I felt. "I have information that will interest him greatly." The man studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Follow me." He led me inside the house, through a hallway decorated with antique paintings, to a large, dark wooden door. He knocked, waited for an answer, then opened the door and let me in. The room was an elegant study, with bookshelves covering the walls, a large carved wooden desk, and tall windows overlooking an interior courtyard. Seated at the desk was an older man, perhaps 70 years old, impeccably dressed in a gray suit. His white hair was combed back, his face marked by wrinkles that spoke of an intense life. "Mrs. Jackson," he said in a surprisingly gentle voice. "What an unexpected pleasure." "Mr. Taylor," I replied with a nod. He gestured toward a chair in front of the desk. "Please, sit down. Would you like some coffee? Or perhaps bourbon?" "No, thank you. I'm here on business." He smiled. A smile that didn't reach his cold eyes. "Of course. Your husband's business, I imagine." "Exactly." "I'm sorry about his accident. I've heard he's improving." I didn't comment on the implication that he was aware of Victor's condition. Of course he was. He probably also knew that Claudia and Sophia had disappeared, and that I was here. "Your husband owes me a considerable sum of money," Taylor continued. $300,000, to be exact, with interest that increases every day. "I know," I replied, "and that's why I'm here." "Ah," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Have you come to ask for more time? Or perhaps to beg for mercy?" I shook my head. "No, Mr. Taylor. I've come to make an exchange." I opened my purse, took out the sealed bag, and placed it on the desk. "This in exchange for my husband's debt." He looked at the bag with curiosity, without touching it. "And what does this bag contain that could be worth $300,000? "Information," I answered. Information that my husband collected over years about your business and that of many others in Harlem and beyond. Names, dates, places, figures. All carefully documented in his black book. Taylor's eyes narrowed imperceptibly. A black book? Yes. Victor kept it as insurance. I took it years ago, as my personal insurance against him. Now I offer it to you, in exchange for canceling the debt and guaranteeing that my family will be left in peace. Taylor extended a hand, took the bag, and opened it carefully. He took out the book, leafed through it slowly. His face remained impassive, but I noticed a slight hardening of his jaw when he came to certain pages. This book contains very sensitive information, he said finally. I know. Information that could be harmful to many people, including myself. I know that too. He closed the book, looked at me with new eyes. And you're telling me this is the only copy? I held his gaze without wavering. It's the original, the only one that exists. How can I be sure? You can't, I replied simply. You have to trust my word, just as I have to trust yours when you say the debt will be cancelled. Silence fell in the room. Taylor studied me, trying to determine if I was bluffing, if there were other copies hidden somewhere. I maintained a steady gaze, though inside I was trembling. Finally he smiled. A different smile this time, almost one of admiration. You know, Mrs. Jackson, in all my years of business, it's rare to meet a woman with your courage and your cunning. It's not courage, Mr. Taylor. It's desperation. I would do anything to protect my family. He nodded slowly. I understand that. Family is everything. He opened a drawer in his desk, took out a sheet of paper and a pen. He wrote something, then passed the sheet to me. It was a formal declaration of cancellation of Victor Jackson's debt, signed and dated. There you go, he said. The debt is cancelled. Your husband is free. I took the sheet, examined it carefully, then folded it and put it in my purse. Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Don't thank me, Mrs. Jackson. You've made a good deal. This information is worth much more than $300,000. I stood up, ready to leave, but he raised a hand. One moment. There's another matter I'd like to discuss with you. I sat back down, cautious. I've always admired your husband's restaurant. Or should I say, your restaurant. I know you're the real soul of that place, the creator of the dishes that have made it famous. I tilted my head, surprised by the compliment. It's true. I'm the one who cooks. And I've heard that, in recent years, you're the one who manages much of the business, while your husband takes care of other things. I didn't deny it. It was the truth. I might be interested in investing in your restaurant, Mrs. Jackson. A legitimate investment, with regular contracts. You could expand, open other locations, perhaps even here in Brooklyn. The proposal took me by surprise. Why would you want to do that? He smiled again. I'm getting old, Mrs. Jackson. I've made many questionable investments in my life. Now I'd like to leave something legitimate, respectable to my granddaughter, and a successful restaurant would be perfect. I reflected on the proposal. It was tempting. With a powerful investor, the restaurant could really grow, expand. But I also knew who I was dealing with. It's an interesting offer, I said cautiously, but I would have to discuss it with my husband and my son. Of course, said Taylor. There's no rush. Think about it, and let me know." I stood up again. This time he didn't stop me. He accompanied me to the door of his study. "One last thing, Mrs. Jackson," he said as I opened the door. "You are an extraordinary woman. Too extraordinary for a man like your husband." I smiled sadly. "Perhaps. But he's the man I chose." "Choices can be changed," he responded simply. I returned to Harlem that same evening, with the document canceling the debt in my purse, and a strange feeling of power that I had never felt before. I had confronted one of the most dangerous men in New York, and emerged victorious. I had saved my family, our restaurant, our future. When I arrived at Southampton Hospital the next day, I found Victor awake and Joseph sitting beside him. Both looked at me with relief when I entered the room. "Mom," said Joseph, hugging me. "Where have you been? I was worried." "I had things to take care of," I replied vaguely. Then I turned to Victor. "How do you feel?" "Better," he said. He really did look improved. Color had returned to his face. His eyes were clearer. "The doctors say I can leave in a few days." "Good," I said. I sat on the edge of the bed and took the document from my purse. "I have something for you." I gave him the sheet. He opened it, read it. His eyes widened in disbelief. How did you do this?" "It doesn't matter how. What matters is that it's done. Your debt is cancelled. You're free." Joseph looked at us, confused. "What debt? What are you talking about?" I looked at Victor. "I think it's time you tell your son the truth, the whole truth." And so, in that hospital room, Victor confessed everything to Joseph. The gambling, the debts, the accident that probably wasn't an accident. Joseph listened in silence, his face hardening more and more. "How could you?" he finally asked his father. "How could you risk everything like that? Your life? Your family? The restaurant that Mom built with so much sacrifice?" Victor lowered his gaze, unable to answer. "And you?" Joseph turned to me. "How did you resolve the debt? What did you give in exchange?" "Something I had for a long time," I replied. "Something I no longer needed." I didn't elaborate further, and Joseph didn't insist. He knew me well enough to know when I wouldn't say more. In the days that followed, I called Claudia to tell her she could return with Sophia. I explained that the danger had passed, that Victor was better, that everything would return to normal, or to what was normal for our strange extended family. When Victor was discharged from the hospital, we had a long conversation, the most honest we'd had in all our years together. "I want to change," he told me. "I want to be a better man. For you, for Joseph, for Sophia. I want to stop gambling, stop lying. I want to start over." I looked at him with a mixture of skepticism and hope. He had made similar promises before, but this time seemed different. The experience of brushing with death seemed to have changed him profoundly. "I'll give you one last chance," I said. "Not for me. What was between us died a long time ago. But for our children, for the restaurant, for everything we've built together." And so we started again, once more. Victor kept his word. He stopped gambling, joined a support group for anonymous gamblers. He returned to work at the restaurant, this time accepting my leadership role. He was a more present father for Sophia, and tried to rebuild his relationship with Joseph, though this proved more difficult. In 1995, I accepted Mr. Taylor's offer to invest in our restaurant. With his financial support, we opened a second location in Brooklyn, then a third in Queens. Victor's place, became a small chain of successful restaurants. The years passed. Sophia grew up, became a beautiful and intelligent young woman. Joseph built a career as a lawyer in Manhattan, got married, gave me 2 wonderful grandchildren. Claudia continued teaching, found a certain balance in her life. And Victor and I? We continued our strange cohabitation. We were no longer husband and wife in the traditional sense, but partners, colleagues, sometimes even friends. We shared memories, successes, failures. We had found a kind of peace, if not happiness. In 2010, Victor became ill. Lung cancer, aggressive, relentless. He fought with the same determination with which he had faced everything in his life. But this time, the enemy was too strong. He died in 2012 in our Harlem home, with Joseph, Claudia, Sophia, and me at his bedside. His last words were for me. "I'm sorry, Martha, for everything. You've been the best woman I could have had, and I've been the worst man for you." I squeezed his hand, cried. Not for lost love, but for lost time, for missed opportunities, for the life we could have had if things had been different. After his death, I discovered that Victor had changed his will. He had left everything to me, the houses, the restaurants, the savings, with instructions that, upon my death, everything would be divided equally between Joseph and Sophia. But there was a problem, a big problem. The will was contested by Anthony, Victor's younger brother who had lived in California for decades. He claimed that the restaurants were partly his, that there had been a verbal agreement between him and Victor in the 60s, even before I came on the scene. A legal battle began that dragged on for years. Anthony had money and powerful lawyers. I had the truth on my side, but sometimes the truth isn't enough in the courts. Joseph took the reins of my legal defense. He worked tirelessly, dug through old documents, found witnesses, built the case piece by piece. Meanwhile, I continued to manage the restaurants. I was now over 70, but I didn't lack energy. I still cooked, created new dishes, trained young chefs. Cooking had always been my salvation, my refuge. The case dragged on until 2024. Anthony died that year, but his son Marcus continued the legal battle. It seemed it would never end. And then, finally, in January 2025, the judge issued his ruling. He ruled in my favor on all counts. The restaurants, the houses, all the assets that Victor had built, that we had built together, rightfully, belonged to me. When the judge's gavel came down, a deafening silence filled the courtroom. 50 years of waiting, 50 years of pain, and finally, justice had a face. Mine. I was 82 years old, and for the first time in my life, the law was on my side. Now, sitting in my home in Harlem, with the view of the city stretching endlessly before me, I think about my whole life, the choices I made, the battles I fought, the victories and defeats. I have no regrets. I did what I had to do to survive, to protect my children, to build something that will last beyond my life. Sophia often asks me to tell her stories of the past, of what life was like before. Joseph wants me to write my memoirs. Maybe I will someday, or maybe I'll let some secrets die with me. What matters is that I won, not just in court, but in life. I've overcome betrayals, threats, losses. I've transformed pain into strength, anger into determination. The judge ruled in my favor in January 2025. But the real victory was understanding after all these years that the only judgment that really matters is the one we make of ourselves. And I, Martha Wilson Jackson, can finally look in the mirror and say, you did the best you could. You lived with honor. You loved, lost, fought, won. And this, in the end, is all that matters.
Thank you for listening to this story. If it touched your heart, Make sure to subscribe to our channel and stay with us for the next story. It's already waiting for you on the screen. Because every story told by a grandmother carries the strength of generations. Click and keep listening. We'll be right here.